Welcome and thank you so much for attending. Welcome to the April Gray Associates Demand Trend webinar that is designed specifically for community college professionals. This is not your average webinar. It is an opportunity to gain insights into labor market data for program evaluation and use data to debunk common myths about community college programs. We have with us Bob Atkins, who is not only Gray's CEO, but also a program evaluation expert and a best-selling author among higher ed publications. A few housekeeping tips to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a place called Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during the session and we'll follow up later with you if we do run out of time. Have you been wondering about launching a particular new program or what the potential job market looks like for your students? At the end of the presentation, we will give you the opportunity to review programs in real time with PES software and Gray's Director of Customer Success. You can pop your program request into the Q&A at any time during this presentation. And now, without further ado, I will turn things over to our CEO and founder, Bob Atkins.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon and to share the results for March. Spoiler alert, they're pretty good. It's nice to finally see some light at the end of the tunnel for our colleagues in the community college sector. So let me get started. We'll walk through first what Marianne mentioned, the PES, and you might well be wondering, what the heck is a PES? Well, PES is a program evaluation system. It's a new type of software, data, and services that are needed in order to improve and better inform program evaluation and management, really across all of higher ed, as well as in the community college sector more specifically. It starts with data and software, and the data needs to include data on markets, what do students want, what do employers want, margins, how much money does this program make, which programs can I expect will generate the funds to fund the smaller programs that may lose money or not generate any. What are the academic standards a program should be upholding? And how is this program aligned with the mission? All of that needs to be embedded in a program evaluation system. But the data and software are not enough to make the full system. The system includes the processes that are required and the people who have to participate in those so that you have the right amount, the right judgment to apply to the data that's in front of you. There is not yet an AI algorithm. You can't type into ChatGPT and find out what programs to start, stop, or grow. That doesn't yet work. I'm hoping for the sake of our business, it won't work for another few weeks. Or maybe I can hope for months. I don't know. If you look out 5 years, where we'll be. But for now, ChatGPT can't replace us and can't replace all of you in the decision-making process about academic programs at your institutions. But the data and software can better inform your decisions and help you make help inform your judgment about what's right for your institution. Now, as Marianne mentioned, we'd like to give everybody a chance to see data on their program of interest. So if you have one, you're welcome to put it in the chat. And if you want to just wait to the end, Winnell will be here and we'll actually bring up live scorecards so you can see how your program idea does along about 50 metrics that we keep track of. We'll be looking at the national level. For technical reasons, it's not practical to look at a local level during the webinar. So let's start out and look at what's going on with student demand. We'll talk about leading indicators, that's Google search volume. And if you think about, that's a forward-looking indicator. Recent trends, we'll look at enrollment, and then we'll look at non-degree courses and what's happening there. Then we'll turn to employment and look at some current indicators of what's going on in the job market. And we'll conclude with program of the month and then summarize the presentation. So that's our agenda for today. If there's anything you would like us to cover, feel free to put in a question or make a suggestion and you'll get my very best ad lib. What's going on with student demand data? Well, traditionally people have focused primarily on iPads, but there are actually other better sources of insight on student demand. If you look at Google, Google's actually going to tell you what's going to happen with enrollment 3 to 6 months from now. The students are out there searching, are not yet in school and won't be for some time. Enrollment tells you what people recently did. Both of those are behaviors. They're not surveys or stated intentions. They're actual behaviors of real live students, potential students in the marketplace. And enrollment is current as of last fall, so it's pretty recent data. What we've always had to rely on in the past is iPads, and iPads is kind of marching to a different drummer. Its most current data is from 2021, and in the community college sector, people picked their major 2 to 4 years before that, depending on how fast they went through school. So we're really looking at data from 2019 to 2017. So it's at least 3 years out of date, 4 years out of date, and maybe as many as 5 or 6. So keep that in mind. It's a good indicator of overall program size, good way to find competitors, not a great way to understand trends in the marketplace because it's so dated. What is happening out there? Well, let me explain how to read some of these charts that we'll go through just so it's clear for you. The dark bar here is 2021. The light blue bar is 2022. The greenish bar is 2023. And what we're hoping for in most of these charts is to see them go up from left to right, from darker to light blue to green. That would indicate a program that's been growing. This year, in fact, in March, we did have growth. It's up 6%. That's the third consecutive month of growth over the results from 2022. So pretty encouraging sign. And you can see the tail end of 2022 was up substantially from 2021 as well. So we're starting to see some consistency in the forward-looking demand for community college programs. I find it very encouraging. It's been a long time coming, a number of difficult years. What's really hot out there? Well, sterile processing tech, for some reason, is leading the pack right now in terms of student interest, probably because it's a relatively short program and has an obvious linkage to the job market, and also for people who want to work in a hospital environment. So demand for that program is up 96%. Health and information records tech is up 56%. Medical billing and coding up 36%. And then in the health sector, again, down here, we see magnetic resonance imaging, MRI tech, up 24%. So very strong showing for healthcare in terms of program growth. 4 of our top 10 programs are actually healthcare programs. Next in line is career and technical education. Culinary up 33%, electrician up 23%, computer and installation repair up 16%, and HVAC up 14%. That's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning up 14%. So good showing by the trades. And often these lists are very eclectic, and other is actually the biggest category. Not the case here. We have a couple of other programs that made the top 10, American Sign Language and Air Traffic Controller. As I mentioned, growth is a new thing. And if we look backwards in terms of enrollment, and this is fall enrollment, in 2018 to 2019, it was down 1.9%. 2019 to 2020, big drop. We're talking COVID here, down 7.5%. Another drop in 2021 to down 6.3%, and down 2.8% in 2022. So that's total fall enrollment, all classes, not just freshmen or new entrants. And we see this downward trend that fortunately is starting to abate, but still negative. So what's the good news? Well, we still have to look at new student enrollment, which is an indicator of what's happening right now, and then the size of classes in school going forward. That was going down in 18 to 19, again down strongly 19 to 20, another drop 20 to 21. And then the good news, we're seeing the first increase in years, up 3% in new student enrollment last fall. And in my discussions with qualitative testing this with community colleges out there, we do hear that. People are seeing their first few classes with increased enrollment. And I hope that trend continues for all of our sake. Now, let's take a look at what grew. We'll look at this in 2 groups, certificate and associate level programs. CTE is a pretty good showing here. 3 of our top 10 programs are CTE. Commercial truck and bus driver, number 1 with 41% growth. Pretty impressive, very strong job market for that as well. Not a terribly expensive program to set up. It turns out you could lease the trucks, and all you really need is a parking lot to get that underway. It is a different program. It doesn't rely on Title IV funding. Typically, it's going to rely on workforce funding, but nice, quick way to get people out into the workforce, making a decent living. Cosmetology up 10%, auto mechanics tech up 9%. So 3 of the top 10 in career and technical education. Next in our groupings, we have infotech with 3 jobs, three programs in the top five, cybersecurity, IT, and computer and information sciences general. And, again, sort of spoiler alert, keep an eye out for cybersecurity. It does well at all degree levels in any way you want to look at it. And that 32% growth, typically when I see that, it's in a smallish program that's growing quickly. Neither cyber or IT are small programs. These are big programs growing at very healthy rates, as is computer science. So this isn't fringe stuff we're seeing here. We're seeing very, core programs growing at a good clip. Then we have what we called other, criminal justice, early childhood education, entrepreneurship, real estate. God bless those entrepreneurs. I am one. And I'm not sure I would recommend it to the faint of heart, but I hope they all do well. Now let's look at the associate level. I mentioned checking cybersecurity, and there it is again, 19% growth year over year. Infotech took 3 of the top 10 slots, with computer science at 9%, computer support specialist up 7%. Career and technical education also did well, up 13% for carpentry, 8% for welding, 8% for bakery and pastry chef. And then we have a variety of other things. Natural sciences up 16%, real estate up 13%, operations management up 9%, and child development up 8% year over year. So some good, healthy growth in associate programs, though notably these growers aren't increasing at the same pace that our certificates were. Here we're talking under 20%, where we had a number for the certificates that were up well over 20%. Now, there's this whole other beast out there of certificate courses. These are not degrees. They may ladder in degree, but they may not. And typically on Coursera, they won't. Although there are individual programs, especially at the master's level, where you can start taking these courses and then jump out into a master's program at a university. But generally speaking, these are standalone. Second caveat here is don't interpret enrollment here the same way you'd interpret enrollment at your school. Most of the folks here who enroll may drop out after one class. They're still counted as having enrolled. So that 822,000 is nothing like 822,000 people who enrolled and completed a course. I don't know what the real ratios are, but they're proportional in the sense that 822,001 is proportionally larger than 576,000 in a different certificate. So just don't get overwhelmed by the size here. It is still impressive, but it's not really directly comparable unit for unit to a typical academic program or even a certificate offered at an institution. So what's hot with that caveat? Well, infotech is hot. That's not surprising. That's where a lot of the MOOCs got their start. That's massively online open courses. And infotech was really the foundation of that, the software program that launched at Stanford a number of years ago. It was a foundation of Coursera, actually. And what we see is, again, data everywhere. In infotech, we've got foundations of user experience, technical support fundamentals, and programming for everybody. 4 of our top 10 slots are infotech per se. We've got, I thought, interestingly, a couple of things in languages, however you spell that word, writing in the sciences, and English for career development. And if we continue down the list here a little bit, beyond the top 10, you'd find other languages that are in high demand at this level on MOOCs, which is an interesting contrast with what we see in programs in higher ed, where the languages have really been dying away. So there is an audience for them. It is not the same audience or format that we have in traditional higher ed. What else out there? Foundations of project management, the science of well-being, I think an interesting one that's always in the top 10, asking questions to make data-driven decisions, and finally, financial markets. Now, what are these courses and how do they align with job markets? Well, Google offers a course on Coursera, and over 1 million people have enrolled in it. It's Google's project management certificate. And it, as they say here, starts your path to a career in project management. And they allege that you'll learn in-demand skills that will have you job ready in less than 6 months. No degree or experience is required. That's quite a claim. Now, let's take a look. Oh, by the way, 4.8 out of 5 rating for that. So a lot of students think they got good training here. Then the question is, did they really teach people job-related skills? Well, they say the skills you can learn are change management, procurement, process improvement, business development, and project management software. The question then becomes, are those the skills that employers want in a project manager? So if you look at job postings and look at the frequency of mention in job postings of skills, what you find is change management's up there, number one in this list, procurement, process improvement, business development, project management software. They literally nailed 5 of the top 5 skill required in job postings. So think about that in terms of the care that they must have taken to actually go out and assess what the skills are in the job market, and then be sure to include those specific skills in their program. So very important concept. It's extremely doable. We and others keep skills data so you can see what's needed in skills for a program, and keep that mapping alive when you're designing your programs so that people really are learning the skills they'll need when they get out in the workplace. Now let's take a look at employment, and we're going to talk about some current indicators on the employment market. First things first, though, you got to understand that the linkage between academic programs and occupations or jobs is not what it's made out to be. This often starts at the National Center for Education Statistics, that's NCES, and they have a crosswalk, and it assumes that people should go into the fields for which they're directly prepared. Or to be a little bit fairer to my colleagues that do labor market economics, that we should only consider jobs relevant if they're the jobs for which a student with a given degree was directly prepared. Well, that allows you to arrive at an opinion about what jobs link with what programs without looking at any empirical data. And that is literally a quote from the NCS crosswalk site. The SIP-SOC crosswalk is not based on actual empirical data. SIPs are academic programs and SOCs are standard occupation codes. If they're not, then we ought to have a look out there and see what people really do and find out if those occupational mappings are relevant for our graduates. And the answer by and large is no. So let's take a look at this. We analyzed 634 programs. We used data from the American Community Survey, which is a survey of some 2.5 million people. And they asked, what did you major in? What, in particular to bachelor's level, by the way, and what job did you actually get? And what we found was 78% of programs, fewer than 20% of the graduates went into fields for which they were directly prepared, or more precisely into occupations for which they were directly prepared. So 80% of programs, less than a fifth of their grads went into programs which they're into jobs which are directly prepared, i.e. people don't do what you think they're going to do. They are not going to let themselves get pigeonholed into a very narrow set of occupations just because they majored in a certain subject. Almost no programs have over 60% of their graduates going into the fields for which they're directly prepared. Specifically, it's only 2% of programs where more than 60% of their graduates go into direct prep fields. Not a lot. So remember, if you ever see the NCS crosswalk or you see people talking about there are only 4 or 5 jobs available for people in this field, usually not the case. And usually is an understatement. It's almost never the case. Let's take a little bit closer look at some of that. Let's take auto mechanics. Pretty straight up program, teaches you to do one thing, fix cars. And indeed, 49% of students go into the field for which they're directly prepared. Now, it turns out that's a fair number of fields, and we were pretty generous when we went through the fields that they go into and aligned anything that was reasonably plausible with auto tech. So obviously top of the list is auto tech, technician, mechanic, service manager, master tech, even a sales associate, line technician, service advisor, manager. I could make an argument that there are a couple of things here that might or might not really be directly related. So that 49% is an optimistic estimate of the number of people who will actually go into direct prep fields with a degree as precise as automotive mechanic. What kind of happens to these folks? Let's take a look at one example here. This is an actual person, and all of this data comes from an analysis of information that we have on about 70 million people, what their undergraduate degree was, including certificates and associate degrees, and what jobs they held. And we can see this longitudinally over time. And indeed, this graduate went out and became an auto tech, and they were an auto tech for 8 years. Not bad. And then they shifted though, and they went through three jobs in pretty quick succession: military builder, intern estimator, and construction manager, which is what the job that they continue to have. So this idea that, even if they go into the field for which they're directly prepared, that they're going to stay in that field, not really true. And one of the analysis we'll do of this data set is to look and see what the jobs are people get when they're first out of school. And I suspect those are going to line up at the associate certificate level reasonably well with their degree. But I think quickly after that, there's a diaspora, and they scatter out into all kinds of other fields where they find better opportunities for themselves. And let's not think of that as a defect. I think that's actually an attribute of both the people and our economy. And I'll come back to that in just a sec. Let's take a second example to see if it bears out. Well, if we take the NCS crosswalk for public health general, which is an associate's degree program typically, we find that they map it into 4 fields: community health worker, health education specialist, health specialties, and medical and health services managers. Pretty logical. Seems like what people would do with a public health degree, except they don't. They go into 385 fields, not 4 fields. And you'll notice that the top fields are the top 2 were not mentioned on the prior page. One is managers, all other. The second is registered nursing. So folks with this degree may go on and pick up a nursing degree as well. And you can see the other things here. Many go on and study medicine. Some become teachers. Some only make it to be receptionists, and some become business operations specialists. And this is just the top 10. When you look more broadly at all the different things people do with a public health degree, you realize you can't pigeonhole these graduates. In fact, you can't really pigeonhole any graduates. Over time, they find what they want to do, they find better opportunities, and they go off into other spaces where they may make more money than they would if they stayed in their space, or they may do something that they think is important, but makes less money. But in any case, it's a whole wide range of things. And I mentioned you can think of this as a defect. They studied one thing, but they couldn't do that, so they went and do something else. I think that's a misconception. You look at some of these things they did, they're not a step down. Becoming a registered nurse is a very good profession. Becoming a doctor certainly is. There's some things here where they may have overeducated if they've got a 4-year degree, receptionist and information clerks. But as an associate potentially or certificate in this field, not so bad. HR, education, physician assistants. There are just dozens and dozens of things that people really do with a degree that many of which you would never anticipate. That's because you can't centrally plan the economy. It's because there is no linear path. Much though an economist or a government official might like to be able to say, I study this, you go do that, people don't. And that's why we call it a free and open economy. People tried central planning, if you recall, back in the Soviet Union. And the old joke was that if they ran the desert, you'd run out of sand. It's not a good way to run things. It's not how we operate. And you end up with this kind of creative seeking of jobs that best fit a person and other opportunities beyond what you might expect. Again, not a problem, actually, a positive attribute of the way education in our economy works. It has another important implication, which is the foundational education you give people in basic reading, writing, and arithmetic is very important, because whatever it is they're studying, very likely they're going to end up doing something else where those fundamental skills will be critical. So keep that in mind as you design majors and so forth. Make sure people get that, reinforce the baseline skills that honestly they should have learned in high school. But I think we all know in many cases people come into college underprepared. And part of what we're doing is bringing them up to a level they should have achieved prior to college, but a level they will certainly need when they go out into the workforce. Now, another myth that we're going to dispel here is the idea that you can take BLS forecasts and make sound decisions using them. It's really not true. BLS forecasts are not very accurate. 82% of them are off by 50% or more. Think about that. So 82% of those forecasts are off by 50% or more. Now, we took a look at this. He said, well, at least they can help me understand if the field is going to grow or shrink. Let's hope for that. So we tested that. The answer is not really. BLS is about as accurate as a coin toss when it comes to guessing whether a field is going to grow or shrink. They get it right about 62% of the time. If you flip the coin, you get it right about 50% of the time. So it's not a very impressive increase over random. And the other problem is, as you see here, they tend to overestimate growth. So they do exactly what you don't want to do. They would encourage you to get into programs that are supposedly growing that won't turn out to grow in the end. So keep that in mind. Not that you shouldn't look at BLS forecasts, but you shouldn't overweight them when you're making program decisions. Look at the trends, which are pretty accurate. Look at total employment, very important number. Just don't overemphasize the BLS forecast. I would also say use your judgment. There are fields where the underlying demographics or technology drivers are very steady over time, and those are safer bets than areas like hospitality that get whipsawed by the economy and COVID and a number of other factors. You know, in recession, people stop traveling, so it can go up and down very quickly. If you compare that with healthcare, where we've got a fundamental demographic force pushing up demand for healthcare, much more reliable bet that healthcare jobs are going to grow in the future than hospitality. It might grow, but it's likely to go up and down a lot in the meantime. So I think, again, you can use your judgment, use your knowledge of what's going on, both demographically and in the economy, to inform your judgment about what's likely to grow and what's not. And use BLS as a support for that, but don't let it replace your thoughts. So what is happening out there with job postings? Well, it looks a little gloomy if you look year over year. We're down 24%. But that's really not the whole story when you look at this. Last year was still bouncing back from COVID, so we saw a spike in job postings, very unusual level of growth. And I think we're coming back to something more akin to normal now, rather than what here would suggest as a decline. If you actually look month over month, we're up 4.5%, which is an encouraging number in some ways and discouraging in others. As many of you know, the Federal Reserve is very worried that we have too many jobs and not enough people to fill them. It's a high quality problem to have, but it's probably driving inflation. And so the Federal Reserve is going to keep raising rates because we see this very strong job environment. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. At some point, the increase in rates is going to come home to haunt us. We saw the first instance of that with Silicon Valley Bank failing because they were on the wrong side of the interest rate increase, essentially. As things like that trickle through the economy because the rate increases, I think we may see a slowdown, and it could be a catastrophic slowdown if a couple of bad things happen. I'll come back to that. But right now, things are actually pretty good. So if you want to get worried, lie awake at night, the two catastrophic events are governmental incompetence and not raising the debt ceiling. If we do that, you'll see 1928 all over again. I don't know all the different ways failing to pay our debts would damage the country. I think they're nearly limitless. And certainly in terms of the economy, it would be catastrophic. The second thing that's happening out there that worries me is a glut of office space. As all of you know, working from home is a trend. Not really a trend, it's happened. And many, many more people are working from home. There's a lot of empty office space. Occupancy rates are down from the high 90s to around 90% right now. I don't think office building owners can pay the rent, pay the mortgages on their buildings at 90% occupancy. So there's a risk out there of massive failures to repay, which then in turn will come and hit the banking system. So I am worried about that. I think SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, might have been a warning sign. But there's a whole other problem brewing out there in the debt held by large landlords for commercial property that could hit us, I don't know when, and I hope it never does. But right now we're good, and we're considerably better than Q4 last year. So as long as we can avoid those sort of two man-made disasters, I think we're in good shape. What's growing fastest? This is one I've never seen on top of the list before that I recall. Telecom equipment installers and repairers, number one, with 131% year-over-year growth in job postings. This may be partly governmental spending. We're trying to build out the internet so that the underserved communities get it. And that may be a part of why we're seeing this growth in demand for equipment installers. Light truck drivers, I think all of us have read about the shortage of drivers. that appears to continue, and very robust growth there in terms of job postings. Sales reps, wholesale and manufacturing, bookkeeping, just a whole range of things, loan officers, real estate agents, human resources specialists. I look at these growth rates and this feels like a very healthy economy to me. Again, we've got some risks coming, but right now we're in very good shape across a number of fronts. Now let's look at, you could call them skills, but I think they're really functional and industry requirements on the left. Microsoft Office is top of the list, and any of you have heard me before, I will say this again, it is absolutely incumbent on us to teach people how to use Office, including Excel, so that when they come out in the workforce, they're conversant and comfortable using those systems. They don't have to be able to write macros in Excel, but they do have to know how to enter data and just be comfortable opening it up and using it. So keep that in mind. It's a requirement in almost every job out there, from nursing to construction management. Marketing, big, accounting, construction, billing. These are all both a combination of industries or functions that are hot right now. Finance, merchandising, project management, going back to the course, big area, lots of jobs, nursing care, and data entry. Then we, as we went through our data, we found a group of, again, difficult to name, but I call them general and managerial requirements. And these don't have a particular skill. It's not about knowing Excel. They're more almost human capabilities: customer service, leadership, supervision, planning, research, monitoring, organizational skills, collaboration, communications, and writing. And I think those last two really speak to some of the interest we're seeing in the certificates earlier about writing. There are a lot of people out there who realize their communication skills need to improve even after college, are coming back and learning about these things because they're very much in demand in the workplace. So what are the most frequently required certifications? That is, what do employers demand that their folks have in terms of certification? First is a security clearance. Lots of jobs out there working for the government, working for government contractors require security clearance. Certified medical assistant, licensed practical nurse, certified nursing, basic life support, advanced life support, pediatric life support. Not surprising in the health professions, people want you to pass a test before you can get the job. I'm kind of glad that happens, and that the folks who are working on us actually have been tested and we know that they're competent at what they do before they go to save your life. So reassuring there. And then we see other things that are more just general: forklift certification, serve safe certification, and food safety certification. So if you group these and said health and safety, you'd have 9 out of 10 of the top certifications. Now, knowing what jobs people want is not enough to design a good program. Why is that? Well, what students want to study and what employers want to hire are very loosely related. I've run the correlation analysis on this, and at best 30% of the demand for the student demand can be explained by jobs, i.e. there's only about a 30% correlation between what students want to study and what employers want to hire. What's the implication for you? Well, if you launch a program because employers want more people in that field and you don't check student demand, there's a very good chance you're going to end up with a lab for optics that's been funded, in one client's case, cost $500,000, and no students to take the course. They ended up with a half a dozen students in that program. So you got to check both ends of the funnel, if you will, both what employers want and what students want. And here's a great example: insurance. Very high employment score, good wages, lots of jobs. But I don't think there are a lot of high school students who say, to themselves, I want to go into the insurance business. So you don't see a lot of demand for that at the college level. There are a bunch that are kind of lined up with where student demand and employment are roughly even, whether that's agribusiness, diesel mechanics, real estate, or criminal justice, or LPN. And then there's some where they're just dramatically different. Lots of people want to take bookkeeping, but the jobs are not great, not a lot of pay, not a lot of jobs. Psychology, where almost no one who gets a psych degree is going to end up in a field directly related to psychology, but people like to study it. And by the way, they'll be fine. They just go into a lot of other fields where the knowledge of human behavior is helpful to them. So keep that in mind. When you're designing programs, you need to understand what employers want, but I would say equally important, what do students want? Because it's the students who are going to pay the bills at your institution in most cases. Now let's look at one specific program. Here we're going to look at the market side of that program: student demand, employment, competition, and degree fit. That is, what level is what a degree level is appropriate for this particular program. Now, when we do this, we would suggest that you find some way to rank programs, all of them that you're considering and the ones you have. Why do you need to do that? It's very difficult to interpret numbers without something to compare them to. So the comparisons become extremely important. In this case, we look at the program. We look at create an overall score. In our system, we use about 50 variables. You may use fewer. This is a lot for you to try and keep track of. We look at student demand metrics, things like Google search volumes and completions. We look at competitive intensity. How many competitors are there? What does it cost to buy a lead in that market? How many jobs are there for graduates? What do they pay? And what is the appropriate degree level for that particular job? And that allows us to use those variables. We assign weights to each of them and thresholds. And when somebody exceeds those thresholds, they get points. And the number of points vary depending on how well they do. Think of it as a huge grade curve for programs. And now let's take a look at one program. You can see here, it made the 99th percentile out of the 1,500 programs we track. So that's one of the 15 highest scoring programs in our data set. Student demand did well, 90th percentile. Competitive intensity is okay at 88th percentile. And jobs are off the charts at 99th percentile. So when you put all that together, you end up a 99th percentile program. If we look at it in a little bit more depth, and here we're going to start with student demand. And let me begin by explaining the colors. The green here means good. If it's dark green, or medium, this is the medium green actually, that means it's 95th to 98th percentile. The light green is 90th percentile. And if it gets all the way up to 98th percentile, you'll see it goes dark green. As it shades away from green towards red, it's getting worse. So simple way of understanding our color coding is green is good, red is bad. And as qualitative as that sounds, remember that the actual colors are keyed to the percentiles. So it's actually a very rigorous way of looking at a program. You can literally look at the colors and get a very good sense of what's going on. So here, let's start with international page views. There are 266. Why do we percentile things? Well, neither you nor I know if 266 is a lot of international page views. As it turns out, it is. It's 92nd percentile in our data set. So with that percentile in the color, you can interpret those page views and understand it's pretty healthy international interest in this program. Student enrollment volume is what I would call good. 81, B, not maybe, I guess it's a B minus technically, not bad. On ground and online completions, pretty good, 93. So it's in it, looking backwards, this is a pretty decent sized program. I would be concerned, we'll come back to this in a second. Google search volume is only at the 63rd percentile, which might indicate that there's a bit of a problem with demand for this program looking forward. So let's take a look at that and see what's going on. So now we're looking at growth. And what we see is completions are down 30%. But new student enrollment's up 7%. And Google search volume, remember we were worried about that, it's actually up 5%. So what does it mean in this case, when the growth numbers are really radically different one from another? Well, given that the completions express what students were interested in 3 or 4 years ago, I would say what you're looking at there is what students wanted to do back in 2018, 2019, and also the decline that took place during COVID that's leading to a reduction in completions now. So I would say if you want to understand what's going on currently and what's likely to go on in the future, new student enrollment's a good number and Google search is a good number. And seeing both of those up is encouraging. And those are reasonable increases. They're not the top of our litter, if you will, but they're at the 67th to 70th percentile. So they're roughly in the top 30% of all programs in terms of growth rates. So I would look at this and say it's big, and most likely it's going to be growing. Now let's look at the job market. First, there are about 500,000 jobs available for people here. You can see this is shaded dark green. We're up at the 98th percentile now. And this is direct prep, so keep in mind all those issues with direct prep, and we'll come back to that and show you some other numbers as well. So we got job postings that are very good. Overall, all my measures for direct prep jobs are 96th percentile or higher. Strong demand, whether it's BLS current employment or their estimate of job openings. So I move down. I've got a problem here. Year-over-year growth is negative 4.4%. That worries me, but there may be an explanation that's not because there aren't people interested in hiring out there. What's going on here is there's 70 job postings for every graduate. So the reason that employment isn't growing faster is not that people aren't interested in hiring, is that they can't find graduates to fill the jobs. If there are 70 postings for one graduate, there are a lot of employers who are going to go home without a hire. So keep that in mind. Sometimes when we see a decline in employment, it's not because there's a job demand, it's actually because there aren't enough people to fill the jobs. Pay is good here. It's not great, $71,000. That's 63rd percentile for the US. And now let's turn to competition. A couple of points here. In the competitive sphere, you can see how many campuses are out there. I don't think that's a huge issue. I've seen numbers much higher than this, and they can be a good market or a bad market. The number of competitors isn't really the issue. Where I worry is when I see small programs, and this is a small program. Median program completions is only 5. You do get some big programs. You can see 52 there at some of the bigger schools. So it's not that it can't be big, but it usually isn't. The good news is it's growing up 2 in median completions. So if anything, this is getting better. And I am a little worried because it's looking saturated. Independent of the number of campuses, I can see here that 2 of my metrics for saturation are up at the 87th and 93rd percentile, respectively. Google search cost per click and the Google competition index. Cost per click goes up because people have to bid to get those clicks. So the more people are bidding and the more intensely they bid, the higher that price gets. So that's a good indicator of saturation. And Google competition index ranges from 0 to 1, with 1 being most competitive. And you can see here we've reached a 0.74, which is a 93rd percentile in our data set. So worrisome in the level of competition for this one. And it is beginning to go online. We've got 22 online competitors in this market, and they're taking about 15% share of market. So if you're in this space, and I was doing it on ground, I'd be a little nervous that I'm going to start to get cannibalized by online players. Degree Fit, a very odd program for Degree Fit. You can see we've got 38% of folks here have a certificate, 50% have a bachelor's degree. Then we look over at what people have that are actually in the workforce. We see 43% of the people don't have any college degree, 25% have some college but didn't finish. So it's very possible to go out and work and move up through the ranks in this particular field. For those who have a degree, it's most likely a bachelor's degree, and to a lesser extent, potentially an associate's degree with 9%. So the value of a degree in this field is a bit questionable. It's not that you can't have a bachelor's in it, but a lot of people in the field don't. So we put it all together on one page, and I'm not going to walk back through this with you. This is the individual segments of our work shown on one page. But to give you an idea of how quickly you can assess this, you can walk through all the details, but honestly, if you're looking at a program you've never seen before, somebody's saying this might be good, in a few seconds, you can figure out whether it's worth spending time on. This one would be. It might not be a program you would choose, but there's nothing, it's got some good attributes that would make you want to consider it and potentially dive in more depth. Overall, you can see it's scored at the 97th percentile, so this top line's all green. By the way, we're in the national market. If we were working with you, we'd set up a local market that reflects the exact geography you serve. You can see employment's very strong, dark green. You can see what about it's dark green. Right away, you can pick out the things that are worrisome because they're pink. The future growth rate, for example. You can see student demand is good both in terms of size and growth, as we noticed, was a little spottier, but our future looking ones are good. And competition is a worry. It's not a terrible score, but it's a mediocre score. And I've got a lot of pink here that would make me concerned that this is a pretty competitive program. Now, mind you, this is at the 99th percentile. So what's really easy to spot is a bad program. If it's this good and it's still got greens and blues, you can imagine that for most programs, you're going to open this up and it's going to be a lot of pink and maybe some blue. And you know in literally seconds whether that's going to merit your attention, particularly as a new program, not because it might not have any merit, but because there's almost always going to be a better choice for you to make than that. So let's summarize. Demand for associate and certificate programs is finally looking up. New enrollment grew 3% in fall 2022 for the first time in years. Google searches rose 6% in March 2023. And the hottest program, sterile processing tech, had a 96% increase in Google search volumes in March. What was hot at the certificate level? Commercial truck and bus driver had the fastest year-over-year enrollment growth. Associates, cybersecurity grew the fastest. Job postings were down 24% year-over-year in March, but rose versus Q4 of last year and February 2023. So I remain cautiously optimistic with the concerns that I mentioned. The fastest growing demand was for telecom equipment installers and preparers. Somewhat unusual there, very rapid growth. Demand for operations management and supervision programs is strong. The student metrics are good. There are lots of jobs, and the median program size is growing, although the median program size is not large. And the other point I want to make here, and sort of a major takeaway, is graduates are not pigeons. They work in hundreds of occupations, not in a few niches in the job market. So don't pigeonhole them. Make sure we prepare them for the broad range of opportunities that they really have when they leave school. That's our presentation. I invite you to join us again next month on May 24th at 2 p.m. when we'll present the community college webcast. If you want to see bachelor's stuff, join us at the bachelor's level. Feel free to download this presentation and share it with your colleagues. We encourage that. Don't feel like you're violating a copyright or anything. If you're welcome to do that. And if you'd like to learn more, you can always buy the book. It's a great explanation of how to analyze and evaluate academic programs. So please give us a rating. And remember now, this is your chance. If you have a program you'd like to see a scorecard for, please let us know, put it in the chat or the Q&A. And Winnell will walk you through the analysis of a real live academic program. Let's see, what would be an interesting one, Winnell? We'll get started with one while we wait for folks to come through with an idea.
How would I open up the program rank and we can see, let's pick one when you see them all ranked up.
Okay. And we got the associates filter on, right?
Correct. Yes, we do.
Perfect. So keep that in mind. We have a scoring system that we're working with here that is focused on associates and certificate programs.
And in the meantime, while I wait, I'm just going to go ahead and hover into our enrollment dashboard and see what's growing. And maybe we can pick one of those. Unless you had one, Bob. It sounds like I interjected.
What about HVAC? Let's look at that.
Great. HVAC.
And for those of you who aren't in CTE, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Go ahead and select HVAC here, and then I'm going to populate our scorecard for that.
Now, Winnell, I'm going to do a quick summary here because I think oftentimes I've heard from clients that, this feels complex, and
Okay.
It can be as complex as you want, really. There are many levels at which you can look at this, and there's depth behind it if you want to get, if you're doing a real program in-depth look. So I look at this and right out of the chute, I can see it's done very well. Student demand is extremely strong. It's strong in terms of size. It's also strong in terms of unit growth. Percentage growth is good, but not fabulous. And part of the problem is a very big program, so the percentage growth is more challenging to get. I'm just looking at the colors now. Employment's good. It's blue, it's not bad. The top direct prep looks pretty good, 80s to 90s. Let's check wages. I got some pink there. No, yeah, not great. 32,000 to 49,000. So on the employment side, lots of work, not a lot of pay. But that's not bad actually for a certificate. Then I look at competition, it's pink. And there are a lot of campuses that teach this. And my in-market saturation numbers are also pink. 88th and 68th percentile, not good. That's getting up towards the higher end of the scale. So if you're thinking about this, be prepared for some pretty heady competition. So that is how I would look at it. From there, I'd say, is it worth further analysis? And let's assume it is, and I'll turn it over to Winell for you.
Correct. And, further analysis here would probably focus a lot in, who else is already in this game? How do we compare to the other institutions and campuses that offer this program in the market that we're looking to serve? We can always dive deeper into the 739 campuses with graduates and identify who they are. This is a program that doesn't really exist online. I'm sure there are reasons why that's the case. And then also, this is a program that's almost exclusively certificate. I'd be curious to see any trends associated with these associates level certificates. Are they going up? Are they going down, for example? And I see a question, how are the points calculated to equal the score? That's going to be dependent on the scoring system that we have in place. So, for example, if we're looking at a line item, we're going to go ahead and set minimum and maximum thresholds for a specific value in a line item. In this case, something like campuses with graduates, because it's at the 99th percentile, this is going to be interpreted as a extremely large campus with graduate volume, the 739, and it's resulting in a trigger of a -8. This -8 is actually completely customizable, and one of the value adds of, when you set up your system, you can customize this to read in a way that makes sense to the way that your institution reviews programs, right? We can't change the 739, but we can change the way the scoring rubric and the system interprets what should be triggered as a result of the position of this percentile. In this case, it's a -8, right? All these scores will be added up to give you the quadrant score, and all those quadrant scores will be added up to give you a total score, which would be compared to all other programs in the market. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, it just sounds a little complicated, but basically there are 50 metrics. You get to set the scores for each one of them. So if you want it to be considered a -8, if it's at the 99th percentile, you can set that at -8. If you are like one of my clients that ate competitors for breakfast, you might make that a +8, because the more competitors there are, the more food you have. So it really does depend on the institution. We can customize all that scoring for you, so it reflects your preferences and your beliefs about what makes for a successful program.
Correct. And all these scores will add up to allow us to give you a percentile, and that will speak to that point that Bob made earlier about finding a way to be able to rank programs from high to low. That's going to be the way that this system is going to go ahead and do that. So when we come back into the program rank and we have that macro level view of program performance across all programs, we have a way to see how a program A compares to program B and program C, etc. I'll take a step back here, and maybe we look at auto mechanics tech next. Stay in the scope of our direct to prep opportunities, direct to workforce opportunities. And I'll go ahead and open up the scorecard here for auto mechanics tech. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second while this loads. And here we go. And then really quickly, we can get a similar summary here based on the color coding. We'll see that, student demand is strong, employment is strong, right? Student demand being the current size of demand with new student enrollments, Google search volumes and completions are high. On the employment side, we're seeing strong direct prep job postings, all very large, right? I'm looking at those dark greens. And then in competitive intensity, we're seeing a high or large amount of campuses with graduates or other institutions and campuses in this game, mixed with relatively high in-market saturation metrics as well. Wages at the 26th percentile here for mean wages, and 23rd percentile for 10th percentile wages. So lots of student demand, lots of employment. Pay isn't doing so great. And there's a lot of campuses already in this field as well. Any other programs out there that would be curious about looking at?
If not, I think we're good for today.
Thank you all so very much for joining us.